everything. The meeting's being recorded. So I guess I'm gonna call the meeting to order, and it is 4:08. And we have the agenda in the shared calendar, no, the shared document, shared folder. And we also have it here. So let me let's take a quick look at the agenda. Vivian, can you let me share my screen? And you should also have it in the Zoom invite and in our shared folder. No, Vivian, I need to share my screen. So you can stop sharing your screen so I can share mine.
You should be able to share. I'm not sure what happened there.
But I'm seeing yours, so stop sharing yours and then I can share mine.
Yeah, that's what, it's on multiple participants. It's not letting me close. There, okay. You're still seeing my screen?
Yep. Can I bump you out of the way?
Yeah, go ahead. It says multiple participants can share.
Yep,
something.
I can, yeah, I've now bumped you out.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys. So everybody should now be seeing my screen, correct? Correct, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So let's take a look at the agenda. I want us to go through this out of the way so I can scroll. We're going to be focusing on budget discussions. The two things we're going to look at today are expense scenarios and our cut strategies. Those are the two items, number 2 and number 5, that are, we have a link to the document there. We also have a schedule of our upcoming meetings and what we're hoping to accomplish in these meetings. And I think that was discussed at our last SBAC meeting. So we have 2 meetings in March, 2 in April, and 2 in May. And this is our, we have one more February 22nd, another meeting in February. So we will be continuing our budget reduction discussions and trying to hone in on a straw poll for final budget recommendations on May 10th. And then we will vote on the final recommendations on May 24th. And then we will take it to the board for their for them to vote on it on their meeting on June 1st. So that's the roadmap in terms of where we're trying to get to with the meetings that we currently have scheduled. For any reason that we're unable to make this deadline, you know, we can add meetings if needed. So that's my overview of the agenda. Anybody has anything they'd like to add or comment on? So I think that's it for me. I have no additional comments at this time. I just want us to start looking at our strategies as we finalize the cut target and looking at various expense scenarios as well. So with that, is anybody here for public comment? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to Dr. Stevens.
Thanks, Pauline. Hey, I'm going to tell you all a Vivian Ferguson story.
Uh-oh.
Just for fun. I don't think she's actually listening. So Vivian is the person behind the scenes who, you know, keeps us hanging together as a committee. If you've ever attempted to approach Pauline Follansby's office on the 2nd floor, I want to describe the scene to you.
Oh, no.
So first, there's literally police tape stretched across the wall from wall to wall. You could barely get around it just to see into Vivian's cubicle. Then there's floor to ceiling plexiglass. Vivian's behind that. And now she's in the process of putting up stay away posters all over that plexiglass, so you can't even see her. And that's just to get the Vivian. You have to do it, it's even harder to get the Pauline. It's
That's hysterical.
it's important to me that you all realize the security precautions that are taken on the second floor. As if
Thank you, Dr. Stevens.
As if the cards were not enough.
And I'm still expecting you to buy me that roof.
I promised her a plexiglass roof. And what I want Vivian to tell us is, how does police tape keep COVID away?
How does what?
I don't
The
understand.
tape, we keep people away, so we keep COVID away, right?
Yeah, it's a COVID precaution.
I'm just waiting for the next set of security precautions.
There, an AR-15 come in or what?
I don't know. Anyway, so I had to tell a funny little story about Vivian because it always makes me smile when I go visit. So today we're going to continue this conversation about the overall budget. I hope what you sort of end up feeling at the end of our time together is that we're sort of making steady progress towards describing the full set of revenues available to the district. That we're making steady progress and sort of estimating how much we will be spending in the 22-23 school year. That you're hearing really clearly from us that we're identifying potential revenue sources that we know are coming, but that we're not quite sure how much will contribute to our overall spending power. And then we're going to share with you sort of an updated preliminary budget reduction list. You'll see really clearly that we're not all the way to proposing what we imagine we'll have to cut, but that we're well on our way to that list. And this list represents a lot of revisions since we did that exercise back in December for the Alameda County Office of Education. So if you kind of keep in mind this roadmap, we're going to talk about revenue. We're going to talk about expenses. We'll talk about new revenue that we haven't quite defined yet. Then we're going to talk about a cut target and how we get to that cut target. That's kind of the trajectory for today. And in fact, that's going to be the trajectory for the next couple of meetings as we just get closer and closer to, ultimately a budget recommendation that we'll bring to you in May and bring to the board shortly thereafter. So with that, I'm going to turn it right back to our competent chairperson, and we'll start up the agenda.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Stevens. So I thought we could what is going on? I thought we could start looking at our budget cuts strategies. This is a list that we shared with ACOE, and we've actually gone back over that list to determine, can we really score this amount? Do we need more work? And what do we feel comfortable sharing at this time? So can everybody see my screen? I can try to make it a little bigger.
Pauline, I'm wondering, should we sort of go through revenue and expense scenarios first, give everybody the big picture, and then sort of think about the cuts?
Well, I didn't really prepare the revenue
Okay.
because I know we had the $1 million and the money that we're scoring for SPED is actually a strategy.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I just wanted us to kind of, since we ended with our budget reductions, we can kind of see where we are with that and what that's giving us to the target.
We're going to jump right in.
Yeah. And then we can look at so we're so this list in column C, this is what we had taken to ACOE. We had given this to the board and to ACOE in terms of what we were thinking for budget reductions. We actually have cabinet and a few other fiscal members of our BLT, our budget leadership team. So we kind of vet all our ideas there before we bring it to SBAC. So we have a lot of people's input before we actually come and share with you guys. So we had several things on the budget. The first 5 items actually had to do with U9, teachers on special assignment, row 8, and we had over $1 million for special education. In discussion with our team, our BLT, and with Ed Services, Ruben has put in little comments here. At this time, we still need additional work to determine if we can actually effectively count these as budget reductions at this time. I know we've had a discussion in terms of our IAs, and I know, Nicole, this was something that we remembered your comment about the 800,000. Ruben has said we won't score reductions at this time. We'll continue to work to decrease the reliance on contracted services by critically looking at our hiring of IAs and BIS positions. So, so Sam is in the room, and Sam we're aware of the challenges, but right now we're hiring at a rate that's a lot higher than our vacancies. So we're going to be looking at auditing our need of IAs and BISs and try to fill the needs internally, because it's a lot more expensive to go outside. So this is still a lot of work. And we're also looking at our contracted mental health, trying to reduce our reliance, trying to have savings. So these that are highlighted in blue, we are deferring them at this point, and we'll focus on the ones that we think are attainable at this point, and we'll see where we get to. Any comments before I move on?
Oh, this is Nicole. Sorry, I'm gonna
Nicole.
turn my camera on so I can raise my hand. I'm sorry. I just want to say thank you for taking that into consideration, and I understand the process. So I just wanted to say I appreciate your attention on that, everybody.
Sure. Thanks, Nicole. Thank you. So, what are we going to score? That's what we're not going to score. So, we had talked about this educator effectiveness grant. We still think that this is attainable at $250,000, and this is us using 50% of this grant for other expenses. They still need to be identified, but we've scored the $250,000 at this time. Our gardening and cooking program materials, we still think that's attainable. Our class size change for enrollment, and this is tentative, and this is because I've just redone the teacher template, and we're still having discussions with principals, and Kathy and Ruben, our Ed Services and BSEP leaders, they're going to be working with the principals and with HR on this teacher template that we finalized. Actually, we finalized it just yesterday. We got revised enrollment numbers from Francisco. So in terms of this 657, we're leaving it here for now. It's kind of highlighted this yellow color. But when we get additional information after the discussion with principals and we get our final staffing, we'll determine the impact here. And again, we're thinking if we increase our enrollment by 50 students, just due to the fact that our enrollment projections were fairly low, we could actually, Brent, you know what, we never did talk about this. Because we're going to be funded at the new ADA for LCFF. Do we think we're going to score an additional 50 on top of that? And that's still actually possible, but it mightn't give us this amount because we'd have to factor it into the average formula.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking, Pauline, and you're right. We may need to go back and look at that particular number.
I'm just taking notes as we go along. And then this other one, our NPS placements, we're not doing that one either. That was our second tier. The other thing that we were focusing on was eliminating the unfilled OFI supervisor position. And we're scoring that one here. We're also eliminating the unfilled OFI liaison positions. It's split between King and Willard, and that will save us about $90,000. We have not scored this reassessment enrollment. We don't think that's gonna work at this time. Our targeted reductions in operational expenses. This has primarily to do with saving costs for staffing at some departments, central office departments, as well as operational expenses, like for graduation, that was like 50,000. So we have a variety of items in here. And at this time, we think it's still attainable. Is Ruben here? Ruben, did you want to talk about, is Ruben here?
He's not, Pauline. He had to jump over to a meeting on the LCAP.
Oh, okay. So this is a proposal from Ed Services for the teacher induction program. And Brent, do you remember what they were? I think Lisa was proposing this in BLT.
Yeah, this is essentially using incoming grant dollars, new state revenue to be able to offset expenses for teacher induction from the general fund. And that's
And then, sorry, go ahead, Brent.
no, sorry, I probably educator effectiveness dollars.
Okay. And then when we looked at the funding, and I can go back over this if you guys need a refresher in terms of the governor's budget. But one of the things that the governor proposed was additional funding. It was $105 per ADA. And the fact that we're using ADA is actually unusual because we used to use prior year enrollment. So when we did the calculations with our SELPA and our SPED staff, it was going to give us an additional $927,000. And I didn't score it against revenue. I scored it with the anticipation that we will use this additional funding to reduce our contribution to special ed. Right now, we contribute about $24 million to that program. And we're encouraging special ed that this additional funding should not be used for new programming. It should be used to reduce the contribution from the general fund. So this gets us to a $3.1 million budget reduction in budget reductions that we feel fairly confident at this time. So I'd like to open it up for discussion, and this is a chance for SBAC as a group to come up with any other ideas, including the ones that we have not scored. What additional work would you like to see in this area, or additional information you would like to kind of move any of these forward, or any new proposals for budget reductions? And I'm opening it up to everybody. Don't all speak at once. Brent, did you have anything else to add to this, or?
The only thing that I would say is that the team is, looking at additional reductions right now. We didn't feel prepared this afternoon to come with any specific ideas. We're aware that we've still got some additional reductions needed. And we imagine by the 8th that we'll be in a position to bring what I imagine to be $2 million of additional reductions to this group, but we simply weren't prepared, to sort of put those ideas on the table today.
And this comes after a lot of work. It doesn't seem like it's a lot of work, but going back and trying to determine, can we really do this? Is it premature at this time? And we are focusing on efficiencies in our SPED program, which entails a lot of discussion with other members of the SPED team. Terry, you have a question?
Yeah, a quick question. Yes, thank you for the presentation and apologies if this information has already been provided because I logged on a minute late. At our last meeting, we did not have the information to have a target reduction amount provided to SBAC. And I hear you saying 3 million is what's been outlined here, and possibly another 2 million to work out. But combined, looking at the governor's budget in conjunction with the discussion from last week or last SBAC meeting, do we have a target of budget reductions? What is that target, I guess, is my question. Do we know that yet?
We're actually working on it, Terry, because we're considering our one-times, we're considering new asks. So it is a moving target at this point. We have not landed on a final number. We're thinking it's probably going to be in the region of about $6 million, but we have not finalized it as yet. So I'm going to actually walk you through where we are with coming up with the target after this presentation.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yes, Regina?
Hi, thank you. I came in around like 4:18. Did the meeting start at 4 or 4:15?
Supposed to be at 4. Did you get an invitation saying 4:15?
Yeah, we got an email that said that it was moved to 4:15. So because of that, can you just go back to the top and review what was stated about U9? I kind of missed I got the tail end of that. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm sorry for the confusion about the message. So we went, this should look familiar. This is the list that we shared, we came up with for ACOE. And we're taking this list as a beginning point and kind of like doing a deeper dive in terms of what we want to move forward at this time, what we're comfortable moving forward at this time versus what we think needs more homework. So all of these that have this blue here, we're not moving it forward at this time. Ruben has some notes in here that you can actually take a look at this because you have access to this file, but we're not moving any of this forward. We're not comfortable moving it forward at this time. Any other questions? Terry, another question, or did you not take your hand down?
No, another
Oh,
quick
it's
question, maybe,
Oh,
and maybe Kathy can chime in on this. Are any of the proposed cuts highlighted here? Is the thought to move them over to BSEP for consideration?
none of these have, these are straight impacts on the general fund. We have not factored in anything with BSEP as yet.
Okay,
That's
thank
not-
you.
Yeah, when we look at the expenses, we can and our one-time expenses, that's when we're thinking of kind of looking at other funding sources for those. So yes, Emily.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi. I also apologize. I didn't come on till 4:15. No problem. These things happen, but I apologize. I didn't hear the beginning. So I hate to take up time on anything you've already spoke about. So
Oh, that's okay.
um, so I guess I'm just a little unclear. Like, I don't know if you already shared, you know, after the last meeting we had, you did share that we were going to have to make cuts because of increased costs and additional programmatic costs.
Mm-hmm.
Did you or will you provide what the breakdown of that and what those costs are, just as, you know, we're all going to share back with other groups, give updates. So it'll be helpful to know like why exactly we're having to make additional cuts or having to make cuts. And then also, I believe you just shared that we don't know exactly how much we have to cut yet. And if that's the case, like, can you, I guess I'm just not clear on the process of like how we would vote or scale these if we don't know like what, in fact, what, how
So,
to
right.
reduce.
So I think Brent did Brent did his his apart from talking about Vivian, when he talked about the whole process and our next steps, we are going to be looking at expense scenarios. We know what the additional revenue that we're getting from the governor's budget. I shared that with you last time in the multi-year, that was $1 million. We're still trying to find a soft landing in terms of the total budget reductions needed. And to do that, we have to look at existing costs that were funded by one-time funding. We have to look at new asks, which is where I'm taking us to on the next slide. And we also have to just allocate funds for what we think additional expenses are going to be. So I'm going to walk you through that in the meantime. So,
Okay. And
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Thank you for that. And the blue boxes there that we're not considering, is that because we just need more information about them? Or are they off the table?
Right, they're not off the table necessarily. We're talked about like our IAs. I know that we're funding at a higher level. We're funding at possibly twice as many IAs and RIBs or whatever they're called. So our staffing that we have for vacancies, we're using almost twice as many outside RBTs to fill these positions. So there is a need. We're not saying there isn't a need. It's not a frivolous act. So one of the things that we're asking our SPED team, along with HR, along with Ed Services, we're going to be auditing our IEPs to determine exactly who's getting this additional help, and is it absolutely in line with the IEPs that we're getting? So this is going to require significant work. And I don't know if we'll even land at a point this year, but I know this is an area that we're spending a lot of money for our SPED program. We contribute about $24 million and it's increasing every year. So we think there are efficiencies to be made, but we don't want to score it without doing a lot more work in terms of auditing our IEP or placements for our IAs. So that would be the 800,000, and each of these special ed is going to require a lot of work, and we've started this work. We're going to be having budget meetings with Sean, who is the executive director, but at this point we're not comfortable scoring it as a budget reduction.
And is that similar for LEAP, that you're not wanting to score? Is there more information that you're needing about that program?
We're trying to see if this could actually be funded by another program, but again, we're not comfortable scoring it at this time. So everything in the blue box requires a lot more work, a lot more auditing time. It's an area that we would like to revisit, and we our BLT, which is our budget leadership team, we're focusing on these areas, but we're just not comfortable bringing the information today. So,
Thank you.
okay. Matt, hi, how is it going?
I'm good, thanks. Sorry, I feel like I missed a little bit here, and you've answered some of my questions and coming back, but I want to thank you for this document. It's super helpful to see all of this laid out, to see what is currently under consideration, what's kind of been taken off the table. I just want to ask some questions about timeline a little bit, just so I know what's what. I see these boxes in blue, and I understand they all need more research. That can mean, what I understand, anything from, well, maybe we do this next year, right? Or I'm wondering, is for some of these boxes, is it, oh, we'll get back to you in 2 weeks, right? So that's very different, right? So I'm just wondering if you can just maybe go back, and I'm sorry if you did this. I think most of the people came in at 4:15, so I think it'll help everybody. To just talk about what I'll just say what I heard. I heard that all of these sped things are going to need more time and probably won't be figured out before the board probably has to vote on this. And I do know, and I don't think any of them would result in anything around hiring or specifically layoffs, because it's all about bringing stuff in-house. If anything, it's less contractors, more hiring. Now for the U9 and district level TSAs, those decisions have hiring impacts that really need to be figured out before March 15th, but in reality, even before March 15th, because you'd already have to figure out basically your template and your master schedule and what credential areas you need, who's going to get reassigned back to schools, which schools, who gets bumped, and then who's going to get which letter on March 15th, right? So I'm wondering, I'm just talking about in a total practical standpoint, not talking about how I feel, right, about either of these items. I'm just wondering, it's February 8th, when for those two items specifically that do have implications on hiring and specifically layoffs or non-reelections or whatever you want to call it, releases, do we expect that we'll have those answers on that time frame, right? And so that's my question.
I'm going to jump in on this one if that's okay, Pauline.
Sure.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question that you're asking. Matt, what I might do is just sort of go through this list and I'll give you my best answer to each of the items as to whether or not I think this will be relevant in this budget season.
Great, thank you.
Try to answer your question very directly. So I don't see an alteration in our adult special education services this year. It's too large a program adjustment to contemplate, under these circumstances and this fast. I do see that there's the potential for some savings to the sort of IA component of the SPG contract. But by some, I think we're probably going to be much more modest than 800,000. We may be around 100, 150. And those are things, that may add to the overall savings, but that I'm not willing to depend on at this point. Continuing on, I think the ERMs may also be a modest savings, probably not at the 200,000, but again, we don't want to score it. I think we're going to work on it. And if it turns out there's additional savings there, great, but we're not building it into the projections. And then continuing on LEAP, we're not right now contemplating any reduction in the number of LEAP class sizes, or the sections rather, for this coming year. So that really is off the table. I think the effort needs to be on better enrolling students into LEAP, but not reducing sections. And then continuing on, the TSAs as well, I think is also off the table. And let me talk just a moment about that. Most of our TSAs, and I think probably 100% of our TSAs, are funded through a variety of categorical funds or grants or BSEP. And so right now we've not been able to identify ways that we can realize savings in the general fund through some series of sort of shifted funds. So I think also the TSAs is really off the table for this year, Matt.
Okay, great. That does answer exactly the question that I was asking. And just a quick follow-up. I know we have a softer landing and I know we're gonna have a cut target. I'm just wondering from the district perspective, with the softer landing, do we, let's say enrollment stabilizes, okay? And this kind of went back 2 weeks ago, I was kind of asking this question, right? How do we see this playing out next year, right? I'm not asking for a target. Of course, we don't know, but do we see ourselves in a position that we're going to use the softer landing to spread cuts over 2 years? We know we need to make a certain number of cuts this year and that then we're in the clear. I'm just curious because these items that we're taking off the table now, right, could come back on the table next year. And I'm just wondering, if we know we have a cut target, that just changes the way I think about it.
Yep. Yeah, and Pauline, you helped me with this, but the way I've been thinking about it is that one of the fundamental facts about our position now compared to pre-pandemic is that we are 600 students fewer, by way of enrollment. There's no way around that. We can't compensate for that large a number of students leaving the district just through cost of living adjustments. We get more per head, but we really need those heads. So what that means is that over time, we're going to continue to be in this sort of situation that we're right sizing and sort of adjusting spending until we get down to the actual number of students enrolled. We have the advantage right now of using this average. And so there's sort of a bit of inflation this year, but that only lasts for so long. Eventually, we just get to the new average that we're using. So I think, Matt, what you're asking, should we anticipate more cuts next year? I think the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, hearing none, I'll take us back to our agenda and then I will take us to the other link. So Matt, before, and for those of you who came in late, the agenda kind of has like a brief roadmap. We're landing on a straw poll on May 10th, so we don't have a incredible amount of time to do that. We're taking it to, we're voting on it in SBAC on May 24th, and this is the final recommendation. And then we take this to the board on June 1st. Of course, we'll be updating the board with our progress as we go along. But in terms of actually taking it to the board, if they vote on it on May 1st, then we can build this into our preliminary budget. And the other meeting is June 15th. And then the final meeting is June 29th. So we still have, if we use this timeline, we should be able to fit it in with the board's deadline as well. So now I'm going to turn our attention to expense scenarios. And for those of you who want to follow along, it is in the agenda, which is in our folder, and it's also in the invitation. So you have this, you have access to this information. And everybody should have access to this.
Pauline, so could I say a couple words just about this?
Sure.
So for folks who are going through their first budget season in a public school district, wanted to just offer a couple of words about this. So, building the budget each year is this sort of delicate balance of art and science. We get information coming in about revenue and expenses over the course of the season. We don't actually start the season with all of the information in hand that we would need just to build the budget in a straightforward way. So for example, we get the governor's budget in January, but then there's a May revise, and then there's a final budget in June. We know, for example, that we'll be at the bargaining table with our labor partners. We need to budget some money for that or think about how much that might cost, but we won't know the actual cost until we close our contracts. We know we're getting incoming grants, for example, a new grant called the A through G grant, but we don't know how much that will be, and we still don't know when we'll get that information. So what I'm trying to present here, Pauline will present, is that we've built a scenario where we're making some reasonable guesses about incoming revenue and potential expenses. But it is still a bit of a guess. There's still some moving parts in this scenario that we'll fill in as we get more information along the way. So please keep in mind, this is a scenario. It's not necessarily facts as they will emerge over the course of the coming 2 to 3 months. With that, Pauline, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Brent. So as Brent indicated, we're trying to now allocate pots of money to various activities that we know it's necessary. We don't necessarily know the total amount, but we know that we have to allocate some funds to these expenses, and that's part of the balancing act. That's part of our budgeting process. We get our revenues, we get our expenses. What are we trying to accomplish with the revenue that we have? And then we have a cut target. So with that being said, I'm not going to focus on our one-time funding. We had come up with a list, and there's a link here to all our one-time funding, including our employees on the Educator Effectiveness Grant and various other costs. we're allocating $1 million for these one-time prior year expenses that were ongoing expenses that were funded with one-time funding the prior year. We have behind the scenes scored about $900,000, but we're still looking at this list, so this is not final. So we hope to have this ready for you at the next meeting in terms of, is this a good estimate for a one-time expenses, or do we think we're going to need to spend more here? Our CB expense.
May I jump in on this?
Sure.
Sorry about that. So this list is actually quite important. Last year, as we were fighting against COVID, we did have one advantage, that there was a lot of incoming money from the state and federal government. And some of that money we use to build good academic programs for students or provide mental health support. So included on this list are things like the BACR counselors that are now supplementing our elementary school mental health counselors. We have programs like College Bound, which is supporting students at the high school, first gen college goers, Puente, and other programs. So what we didn't want to do is simply discontinue that positive work because we only had one-time funding. Rather, we've got a list of these programs, and we're proposing to move some of it into the general fund. And that amount right now is thought to be $1 million to move into the general fund so that those programs can be sustained. Sorry, Paulina, jump in and just.
Oh, okay. I was looking at the chat, just trying to see. Matt says it says the file is in the owner's trash. That's weird. Matt, you can't see, you don't have access to this?
It got sorted out. It's the agenda that was attached in the calendar invite didn't work, but then Vivian got it all sorted out for everybody.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So our next part of expenses, or little group of expenses, this is our negotiation. So we have not obviously started negotiations with our 4 unions, but what we do know is that 1% costs the unrestricted general fund about $1 million. So this is still to be determined, but you can see if it's whatever percentage is determined here, it's going to cost us $1 million per percentage. These other categories are COVID expenses. And again, Terry, did you have a question before I continue?
Yeah, quick question. And this, with the labor negotiations, at least on the educator side, any raise would come out of BERA, right? Not out of the general fund.
No, it comes out of the general fund.
And BSEP, of course.
And BSEP, yeah. Each funding group will bear their share of the 1%. So wherever employees are currently funded, that funding source will pay for their 1%. BERA has already scored the amount that they're going to be giving, and that's 7%, and that's pretty much a done deal. All other expenses have to come from the unrestricted general fund and other funding sources, and this $1 million is the impact on the unrestricted general fund.
So what we're talking about are raises above what BERA has already committed to for next year. Is that accurate or no?
That's accurate, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification.
Sure. Any other questions?
Right.
Well, just to clarify, there's no BERA is paying for 7% of all salaries, and that's it. And so there's no increase in BERA ever again, really. So
yeah. I wanted to clarify, it's not just educators. BERA pays for all employees except for the top, and it's already built into the salary schedule. There is no more BERA was a one-time raise that went into effect in 2020, and it just at this point sustains itself.
Okay, I don't want to hijack the meeting on it, but so I'll circle back and talk to someone else about it to get a better understanding. But thank you so much for that clarification.
I mean, okay, but if you wanted to, you could. I mean, this is a great forum because other people may have that question. So You could ask
Okay,
your
well,
question.
I mean,
Tara.
yeah. No, I mean, I guess just my baseline understanding is in a very simplistic way, and I should know this because I sit on the P&O. So if I don't know it, I'm questioning just kind of general understanding. My understanding that that the 95%, not the 5% that the P&O deals with, but the 95% goes towards salary increases, and that generates approximately, I don't know, 8.7 million or something like that. And then there's a COLA increase that's based on the Bay Area. My rudimentary understanding was that 8.7 million was tagged for raises for the next, on an annual basis for as long as BARA goes on, which is 12 years, to allocate towards raises. So that's why I didn't understand why if the further negotiations were an overlay on top of whatever annual amount BARA generates. So I may not be explaining this in a very articulate manner, but that's the gist of what I'm trying to understand.
Did anybody else want to jump in? Kathy, is Kathy here or is she?
I'm here. I
Oh,
think we covered it, but I hear you, Terry. Let's talk about it some more offline.
Yeah, that's fine. That's why I didn't want to hijack the meeting. Thank you.
okay,
It's for 12 years, just FYI.
okay. So,
I
so
got
the,
two things
oh.
wrong in one chat. Good job, Superintendent. I put that was passed in November and I think it was March and I put 8 years and I think it should be 12.
Oh, is it in the chat?
I'm done
Oh.
chatting. I'll shut up.
We'll get Kathy to chat on this.
That's it.
So, so COVID, of course, is a great unknown. And this may be a bit too conservative at this point, but we are budgeting for our COVID, our contact tracer, our lead coordinator. The COVID leave, we're going to be, if that still continues, there's a cost to the district for offering COVID leave, as well as our PPE cost. We have not, we're not aware of a funding source that actually will cover these expenses. We were fortunate to get a lot of COVID funding that was one time, and that's pretty much exhausted. So we have to set aside some funding for COVID. We have no idea at this time if this is adequate. We've gotten projections. If we're spending the same level that we are this year, it will be close to $1 million. Yes, Matt.
So I just want to say that I appreciate, for now, this set aside. I think it's actually really important that we are prepared. We know that it was all the work we did having these conversations in August and September that actually allowed our schools to stay open in January, when we saw all kinds of really difficult situations surrounding districts. I just want to say that I do think by the time June comes around, we will have a better sense of what the state is thinking in terms of what the testing recommendations are going to be for next year and what kind of budget is going to be attached to that, if any at all. And I think you are correct. I know you're correct. None of that has been released yet. So I think that it's smart to put this in there. But I do, hopefully we're all crossing our fingers that the state is really clear, right, in the next couple of months on what the testing recommendations are going to be and the funding available. So we know, right, because we know that sometimes they'll give you the recommendations, but they're not going to fully fund it. So they're going to say, here's the recommendation. We want you to test this many times a week, but yet this happened this year. We're only going to pay for 7 people or whatever it is. And we needed 17. So, so I think we'll know that. So I think for now, this is great. We'll keep this, keeping this 650, but hopefully that number will go down as we get more information.
Correct. Yeah. Thanks, Matt.
I guess just to say a little bit more about this. So right now, this operating model is to kind of keep some core staff intact. A single person who might be full-time with the district just to do contact tracing, a single person to do testing. with the idea that we might expand and contract over time. But so long as we have the infrastructure, we'll be okay. And that's actually what allowed us to expand pretty quickly in January, is that we had the core team and we built a lot of volunteers around them. Without the core team, most districts weren't able to do anything at all.
Correct. So I'm moving on from COVID. Matt, did you have another question, or is that from the last? You have another question? Oh, okay. Okay, so statutory and safety. This the statutory has to do with our workers' comp rate. So I think I've mentioned this before in this meeting. We are self-insured for workers' comp. And what the district does is every time we run our payroll, we set aside a percentage of our payroll to fund our workers' comp program. We're currently setting aside 2.05%. Based on the most recent actuarial study, we need to be setting aside 3.05%. That's going to cost the general fund $653,000. It's also going to have an impact on all our other programs. So they're going to have to in turn change or set aside this amount per employee, actually. Yes, Matt?
I just had a question about this because this is such a big number, right? An increase of 653,000. And I of course like don't have all the information. I'm wondering, and I don't know how to read these actuarial or whatever reports either. Well, maybe I do. I just have never seen one. I'm, at least for certificated, a lot of the workers' comp stuff, does eventually come across my desk, and I personally would just say I haven't seen an increase in claims compared to prior years necessarily that warrants such like a large jump, and maybe it's not certificated. But I'm just wondering at some point if you could share with me the numbers behind this piece, because it's not like we're increasing like 50 grand. Like this is like a pretty big chunk of money, and I just don't understand.
Right, and I'll just share with you very quickly that during the COVID period, we probably had one claim per month, which was unusual. Most districts had several claims relating to COVID. Now that we are back in person, this rate has just escalated a lot higher than it was before COVID. So, and not setting this money aside will mean that that fund will be upside down from an actual point of view, not just looking at what's incurred but not reported. So I'll be happy to share additional information with you. I just want to make sure that we can afford our program, and it is a benefit. We're a standalone district. We're not kind of tied into a group rate, so we're not impacted by other districts. So I'll be happy to bring that back to the next meeting.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's wrong. I mean, I
No.
trust, I'm really curious about it. I guess that brings one more question. Sorry to have so many. Just like with healthcare benefits, we moved to, CalPERS. We're part of a big group, a big pool. It has lessened the blow on a year-to-year basis. I'm just wondering for workers' comp, I didn't realize that we could be part of a pool. If there's been any work done or any research on looking at the cost benefit, the increased costs of whatever pool we would join over the last 10 years and looking at our own costs. I would love to see that. When we did that work for medical benefits, it was obvious what we needed to do, and we did it. Right. And that was to actually change negotiating benefits with Kaiser on our own, right, or through our broker. So I'm just, again, I'm only asking this because it is such a big number that I'm wondering about that. So
Okay, I'll be happy to look into that for you. And this other safety coordinator, this is a position that would handle the safety for our facilities as well as our or EOC, or what is that? Or center or safety center? What is that, Brent? Or EOC?
Yeah, EOC is right.
Okay, so just in terms of our district has not really been focused on this for a while, and we've been discussing it, but we think that we need this position to not only evaluate the risk for our facilities, but also for the district safety overall. So this would be a new position that that's currently paid for we have a consultant actually beginning this work, but we think this is an important position. So that's $150,000 that we're setting aside for this. And you can see that these two don't actually equal $1 million. We have a little bit of extras in here, but we've set aside $1 million. That number is going to be closer to 800,000 just based on this information.
And I should say on this particular position, I wouldn't want anybody to say that this is a decision already made. These
No.
are ideas, that particular one is coming from staff, as it's been about a decade since we've sort of reviewed and updated all of our campus safety plans. So the idea here is to have somebody on staff to sort of support safe facilities and safety related work. Not a decision, but nonetheless something we like to introduce into this discussion over the spring.
Proposal, right? And then looking at our central office, these are pretty small amounts, but they're quite. Matt, you had another question or? No, okay. So in terms of our informed K-12, we're expanding our use of informed K-12, and this is going to be a fifth. And again, as Brent mentioned, these are asks at this point. It's not totally. It's not a done deal, but we do want to and this is from HR. So this is a $50,000 ask in terms of a software cost, expanding the use or Title IX support. We think we're wanting to have this support next year as well. So we're putting it here as an ask, if you will. Our meal reimbursement, this came out of our, this was one of the things that came up when we're looking at our committees, right, Brent? Where's Brent? The increase in employee meal reimbursement. Again, this is an ask, $20,000, just to increase the cost so that employees can be reimbursed for what we think the meals will cost. We have this position, business human resources integration. We think that's revenue neutral, so there's no cost there. Board governance, there is a request for the board to do a master's in governance for 2 members. That will be $12,000, as well as new board member training, $5,000. So these are the pots of money that we're thinking of just in terms of operations, safety, COVID, etc. And now in terms of,
sorry, may I?
Sure,
Again, I can actually, line 83, which is the vote 16 costs. I can offer what might be an estimate on costs here, and that is, I think it's a one-time cost of $100,000. So I don't know that it will, it should be scored here as an ongoing expense, but that's probably, and let me back up. Vote 16 was passed in, I've done so bad on dates today, passed several years ago by voters in the city of Berkeley to permit students 16 and older to vote in school board elections. It was called Measure Y1, maybe 2016, I'm guessing. And so it's taken a ton of research through several sort of council to work with the Alameda County Registrar of Voters to be able to figure out how to run this election. OUSD has recently passed a similar measure. It looks like the Alameda County Registrar can support us, but we would bear the costs of having 16-year-olds vote. And that cost, I think, looks like it's about $100,000 per election sort of season, so every other year.
Okay. So Brent, did you want to talk about the instructional? We haven't really scored anything here, but we're a lot of discussion in terms of what we're looking at, but we haven't actually scored anything at this point.
Yeah, I can, you're correct, Pauline. There's no dollar figures here. This is a set of programs in the Ed Services Department that we've been, mostly funding through one-time money. Some of it probably is duplicated on that one-time list. But they include, important elements like the ongoing work to support the literacy action plan, our work related to dyslexia, supporting the LCAP, developing a data dashboard, supporting our incoming principals through the Principals Leadership Institute, or PLI, that's line 93, programs related to the Latinx Resolution, the African American Success Initiative. And then there were a set of asks from the BHS math department that they made to the board. We haven't scored those yet, but they're there as a placeholder. So there's sort of a body of work coming from Ed Services that doesn't yet have dollar values on them. We'll get that all put together. Again, these are sort of proposals or ideas, but to be weighed over the course of this budget building season against other expenses, as to their value.
So, and you can see that in terms of some of these proposals, the ACOE teacher residency program, they're thinking that this cost can actually be paid for by the 5% in BERA. That's for recruitment and retention. Actually, it's a carryover. So I think, again, we'll have to work with Kathy just to kind of see if this is a home for this particular program. And of course, in terms of increasing our FTE special ed IAs, we want them, they're currently 0.8. HR, this is a proposal from HR, we want them to add 0.2 FTE. At this point, we think it's revenue neutral because they're going to be using existing costs from timesheets for the extra time. So what does this, bearing in mind, we don't have numbers for all of these areas, just what we've scored so far with several questions, we're looking at $2.7 million. We believe this number is going to be closer to 5 million. We're not sure, but we're working on that. And in terms of us trying to do like really big picture in terms of coming up with a target, we knew from the last meeting and our multi-year based on the governor's budget, we had set aside like $1 million for expenses, new expenses or existing expenses, but we do have this $1 million that we can score. And I took you through the spreadsheet that came up with $3.1 million in budget reductions. So right now, we have available funding, if you will, with budget reductions, we're looking at $4.1 million, but which means that we actually are ahead of the game, but we think this number is, if this number is closer to $5 million or $6 million, that will determine the additional budget reductions that we will need to make. So with that, I can take questions. Unfortunately, we haven't finalized these as yet because we're working on them. And we hope at our next meeting, we will be able to iron out some of these unknowns and have a definite landing point in terms of what we're thinking of for budget reductions. So any questions? I'm going to stop sharing my screen unless somebody wants me to refer to this slide. Any questions or comments or any areas that you'd like to get additional information on? I see Nicole first, then Matt, then Laura. So Nicole.
Thanks so much. I've got all these windows going and I'm confused here, but thank you so much for this. Oh, I'll say that because it's true. Very thankful for all your work on this. At the very top, there's the link to the ongoing expenses with one-time funding.
Yeah.
Which, I've looked at, it's just a big chunk. And so when we get to, looking at the exact list of all the things that we're supporting, keeping going from previous one-year funding plus the cuts and everything, I think it'll be really important to put that all on one page to look at it holistically,
Right. So Nicole, we have been looking at it in BLT, and we have determined that there are several other funding sources, but we haven't finalized that work. So once that's finalized, we'll put it all together. So because that's going to impact, we've set aside $1 million. Do we need it? We're not sure at this time.
Super,
So,
thank you.
sure. Matt, and then Laura, and then Laura.
Thank you for this document, super helpful. Two questions, I think. One is like, if I wanted to like dig a little deeper into this instructional category, who would I talk to? Would that be Ruben? To know what all these exactly mean and why is Ed Services proposing them and what are we hoping to achieve and how much do they cost? Is that what I should do? Is that fair?
That's Ruben, Matt.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure he'd welcome talking to you about it.
Yeah, great. And then my what else was I gonna say here? Oh, I forget my other point, so I'll just raise my hand again later.
Okay, no problem. Hi, Laura.
Hello, my question was actually similar to Matt Myers, just trying to make sure that we have an inclusive voice of new needs, and how is that rolling out to the different schools, and where all this input is coming from, kind of the who, what, when, where, and whys. And also wanted to just let you all know that the PTA Council is working on a very informative document where they are streamlining all of their budgets so that they can kind of get a synergy of expenses and kind of negotiate better. And so I'm not sure how we're just really looking at our services in a whole, in totality, to make sure that we can take advantage and leverage certain services, as well as our after-school programs. I know they probably come under a different funding source with our extended learning programs, but we're going to have significant needs there, and just our learning loss programs. So really want to just think about what are the who, what, when, where, and whys in our comprehensive model for how we're making budget decisions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Estella.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for this table too. I just realized I was unmuted this whole time. So I was really happy to see the increase in FTE for the special ed IAs, and that, that actually just is kind of neutral, and it's reducing the costs on the timesheets for extra time. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I am wondering what the FTE is for the those BHS sped IAs, if it's 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.8, so that 0.8, so it would bring them up to a 1.0.
A 1.0, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then I'm also wondering, in terms of the reduction in enrollment, the 600 that we're looking at, I just am wondering what the projection is for the different grade levels, like elementary, middle, and high school, as we get different amounts for the different groups of students, and when that analysis will be like a more closer to what will actually come to be in projections. So like, because with enrollment for kinder happening, and when we know students are graduating or moving up from middle school to high school, et cetera, I'm just wondering when that will be available.
Okay, so Estella, what I have done, when we did the average for 22, 23, we used what we're estimating our actual enrollment to be for this year. And then when I'm actually flowing it through to our LCFF, we have to do it based on grade span. So I can bring that back and share it with you. We're basing it just on a trend at this point. Francisco has shared the projections for 22, 23, so we could use that ratio. But you are correct that the higher grades get funded at a higher level. I don't think it's going to be significantly different, but it's worth exploring. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or other asks for information that you'd like us to bring back to the next meeting?
Pauline, Shauna had a question regarding the Berkeley High School counselor. She's asking if it's additional counselor or what sort of counselor it is.
Based on, oh, hi, Shauna, sorry, I didn't see that. What counselor are you referring to, Shauna? or Shauna?
It's on your spreadsheet. I don't know. It just says BHS counselor on there.
Do you remember which spreadsheet?
The one you just had up. See.
Oh, that didn't have a an instruction. It didn't have a dollar amount. I think this counselor was going to be funded on one-time funding, but it has found a home in LCAP, so it's not being scored at this point. So I can bring it back to the next meeting.
Is this like a mental health counselor or a academic counselor or a?
Not actually sure.
Oh.
Brent, do you happen to know?
No, I wish I could. We'll get that information, Shauna, from Ed Services and bring it back.
It
Okay.
could be the bridge counselor position that was on one-time money that just an idea potentially.
Maybe that I would just take this to give an answer right now, but we can find out.
Okay, and then I have a question going back to the prior spreadsheet. You mentioned cutting $50,000 and in regards to graduation. I wonder if you might say something more about that.
Well, that's going to be interesting. We looked at all central office expenses that's paid for by the general fund. And one area that we thought we could reduce was our graduation cost. Of course, in COVID, we used COVID funds the last year, and we're actually in the process of finalizing graduation for the high school. So I can bring that back to the next meeting as well. I can actually share that entire list with the group so you can have an idea of what we're thinking about. I would think it was $600 and something thousand reduction.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Matt, do you remember your question? And then Estella?
Yeah, I did remember my question. I know we're still learning a lot about the governor's budget and what the one-times are. Is there going to be a chance where we can talk about how we can apply some of these things to maybe some of the one-times that are coming our way?
On our one-time list, we're looking, we were trying to determine how much funding we're going to get for, was it ELO that Ruben just shared? We're still unpacking the details in terms of how much we're going to be receiving. So as we get that information, we'll build it into our various spreadsheets in terms of what we think we can use this funding for one-time for expenses that were one-time last year, to see if we could use the this new funding. So we're still unpacking that information. I think Ruben just got some information just before this meeting on the amount that we were getting. I think it was ELO. So we will bring that back again as we get more information. So this is helpful to get these questions.
Colleen, do you want to talk about the comment,
One comment.
the comments spreadsheet we have in the folder that people can use?
Oh, yeah. Good idea. Sorry, I forgot about that. I'm like, what comment? So we're gonna have a document. I think it's a shared doc where you can access this document. It's in our shared folder. And again, you guys all have access to our SBAC folder. It's a document where you can put you can request additional information, questions that you want answered ahead of time, so we can be prepared to actually have answers and responses for you during the meetings. So and Vivian has put it a link in our meeting for you to find that document. And please put your name, your affiliation, and your question. It would be helpful if you have the date as well, so we know when you're actually asking the questions. Anything else? Hi, Janet. I'm sorry, I'm missing that. What are you saying, Vivian?
Did you see Janet's comments about it's always helpful to see investments and cuts by PK 5, 6, 8, 9, 12 adult?
Oh, okay. Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, okay. Investments and costs. Okay. Well, anything else, guys? Laura, anything else to add or?
No, I was just saying thanks in the chat. And
Oh,
to all, it's
sure.
good to see all of you.
Oh, good to see everybody too. So I think we're getting a little bit earlier. Our meetings are 4 to 5:30. I'm not sure how we had that miscommunication about 4:15. Don't know if we're trying to accommodate another meeting, but I think we can plan for 4 to 5:30, right, Brent? So, okay. Well, thanks to everybody. I know it's not a final list. Remember, we have a roadmap, what we're trying to accomplish. We have our meetings scheduled at the bottom of the agenda and what we're trying to accomplish. Oh, Matt.
I'm sorry. Now that I realize that we're ending, I do have one more comment. So I know that there are positions on the one-time list, which we haven't really looked at in depth. And I just want to remind everyone that there are some real timeline issues with those positions. If they're contractors, there's not, right? It just doesn't matter in terms of timeline. But if they're not contractors, again, March 15th and leading up to March 15th for both classified now and certificated matter a lot. So it would be good probably to look at that just so we can all be prepared. Because even if it's 2 weeks from now, I think eventually it does have to go to the board, and definitely a layoff notice would need to go to a board, but even a non-reelection possibly. And so I just want to make sure that that we're all on the same page here with the timeline. I understand, yes, the general fund cuts, that is no longer an issue, and that's great, but I think I don't want us to forget about some of the one-time
Right. Right. So Matt, in our BLT, our budget leadership team, Samantha is a member of BLT, and we're actually compiling a list of all our staffing that's funded by one-time funds or discretionary funds, and sharing as we're coming up with budget reductions, if there's any staffing implications, we're also keeping her in the loop. So I'll be happy to bring that to the next meeting and probably invite Sam to come in and talk to the group in terms of the plan for March 15th. I think that might be a good idea. Is that a good idea? Don't all speak at once.
Yeah, either that or we probably, where we do anticipate names being, included on a March 15th list that we want to reach out to our labor partners about that. That may not quite be an SBAC conversation, but we definitely want our labor partners in the loop.
Okay. Okay. Okay, well, if nobody else has any questions or comments, our next meeting is February 22nd at 4 o'clock, 4 to 5:30. And if you need any additional information, remember to use that document, or you can email Vivian or me or Brent. And then we will get back. We will meet and continue this discussion on the 22nd. So, okay. So with that, I'll say bye-bye. And I'll see you guys later. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.